Let's pull up this next story from Law and Crime. ACLU sues Alabama Attorney General over devastating new law making medical care for transgender youth a felony.
It's a lie.
I love how they call it care.
Yeah, it's a lie.
I know, right off the bat. We also have this out of Missouri. Missouri proposes legislation to prohibit gender transitions for minors. This is an important thing here. They call it medical care. And I think there's a framing issue here that at the very least suggests this country is totally fractured under by moral framework. Medical care to the left is a 12-year-old biological male says, I don't feel right. So they say, okay, we're going to give you surgeries, which could, permanently alter, damage your body or restrict your body in some way. That we do that for only gender ideology-based circumstances.
Right. Well, and abortion.
Well, so, what I mean is, on the right, it's very clear this is child abuse.
Yeah.
On the left, it's affirmation and medical care. The issue I take with this is just if a 12-year-old boy said, I'm dysmorphic and I need to cut my hand off, we would not say, well, for the sake of the child, we'll remove their hand. Mm-hmm. But we are seeing young women get double mastectomies even at the age of 13 in some circumstances. I posted a study on Twitter about it. Mm-hmm. So I do want to point out that framing, but then just generally open up the conversation to what we're seeing with these these states that are banning this. And then there are other states that are going the other direction.
Yeah, you have to define your terms. Medical care, medical care is a thing. It's a specific thing, and medical care is something that is done to treat a problem in the body. It's to treat a disease or a malformation or a lesion or something like that. And so then the question is puberty a disease that has to be treated? That's essentially what we're hearing from the trans ideology side of this. They say that, well, the child didn't consent to puberty, and so you have to put a puberty blocker in. Well, puberty is not a disease. It's a natural process in the body.
Well, and it's not just the body. I mean, hormones wash over the brain, and that's how your brain becomes, more fully developed. That's part of it as well. That's part of puberty, is becoming an adult. It's not just a bodily thing. It's also, it's the body of the brain as well.
Yeah, and so this is horrible framing. These people are obviously perfectly happy to be misunderstood as implying this is a law which would say that a kid could not receive a necessary procedure to save their life because they're transgender. That's how this is framed. What it should say is, in Alabama, you are not allowed to give children sex changes. For some reason, some perverts are mad about that.
So the interesting thing about medical care is that I wonder, does medical care in a general sense include psychotherapy?
Well, yeah. Well, let me. Okay, can I make a point on that real fast?
Just a simple question. The answer is yes. We all agree. And then my point was, in Scandinavian countries, they don't do child sex changes. They do psychotherapy. But in the United States, they argue that's conversion therapy and wrong and shouldn't be allowed.
Well, I was just going to say that the problem we're seeing today has nothing to do with science. And I think we should have seen back in the day when the humanities were usurped educationally. It wasn't by accident. And we'd make fun of them like, oh, do you want to go take a class to where you discuss how you feel about an author's book in The American Dream and Great Gatsby? Or do you want to study engineering? Not realizing that the great thinkers and the ideologues, the people who study the humanities and create these ideas, the philosophers, etc., that are out there, and even people that study English, as we look down upon them, they took a hold of the subjects that we disregarded, and they changed the language. They actually, from the ground up, have redefined the ability to define terms. The average person doesn't know what science is. They don't really understand engineering, but they can read a news article written for a 4th grade level reader. And so I was talking to a transgender Antifa. We were talking about this earlier, a trans Tifa, and Satanist on TikTok Live. And the key thing is here, and I notice this with every argument, all we're battling over then is words. So we mock English teachers like, oh, it's just English. You went to school for English. Well, currently, the battle isn't actually in science. It's English. It's defining actually our dictionary and what words mean in terminology. Even biology is mostly just built up of terms. And I mean, yes, Latin and whatnot. But I asked him, I go, the guy goes, legitimately, there's fascistic genocide of trans people all around this country, and you're defending it. And I go, fascistic genocide? Where in the world do you see fascistic genocide? I'm serious. I said, I want to know. Because you're
China.
Well, no, but he said this to me. No, but of trans kids. No, but of trans kids. That's mostly of pets right now. But the rest of Shanghai. But he goes, yeah. And I go, where is this? So he goes, oh, well, in the Texas laws. And I'm like, I'm in Texas. I'm very familiar with the Texas trans laws right now, and there's no genocide happening. So he goes on to define and goes, genocide. And I said, what is genocide, man? What is that? And that's what we have to ask him. What do you mean now by genocide? Because we have no absolute truth. He goes, well, that's taking kids away from parents who want to get, gender reaffirming surgery and hormone therapy. And, and I was like, that's weird for me because I thought genocide involved killing, and all the genocidal maniacs and tyrants over the years apparently wasted a lot of resources. They could have just used, child protective services and took the kids away for 2 weeks, and they would have done, I guess, the racial cleansing that they desired. But I go, well, what are you talking about? And then he brings up the fact, as per mentioned, that this is this new thing called social murder. And so this idea of the fact that if you withhold trans reaffirming, and I'm using their words, reaffirming surgery, you are leading to the increased suicide rate of trans kids. Therefore, your actions are the murderous actions, and your choice to limit is murder. And I'm not defending this.
No,
I was sitting there mind blown going, dude. And the best part about this is I got to ask, I said, when did you start hormones? He goes, it saved my life. It saved my life. He goes, well, 22. I go, okay, so you're saying that hormones saved your life at 22? I hope you were past puberty by 22. So you're a 22-year-old who started taking estradiol and different types of blockers and whatnot at 22. And now you're trying to tell me what a 9-year-old should be doing? Buddy.
Did you see the article in the Washington Post? It was an op-ed by a writer named Corinne Cohn, who was talking about how I don't know what the pronoun is to use in this case. Anyway, Corinne was saying that at 19, this is a story, Tim. At 19, Cohn was castrated. This was intentional, and then it turns out that actually he would have been a gay man, and has never had a sexual experience. When he talks to friends, and friends are very dismayed by this. And in the article, Corinne talks about how never having experienced this, they don't really know what they're missing. And I just find this to be so sad that we are taking away the sexual futures of so many of these kids, not just their reproductive futures, but any real chance at intimacy.
They're giving up something that they don't understand, and they're giving it up for the rest of their lives. And that's why the way this is all framed, that this is we're infringing on the rights of the child. No, none of these laws are restricting the child. This is about restricting you as the adult. We're saying that
that's correct.
cannot do that to
you
a child.
Amen.
And the idea that a child has that their rights are being infringed upon because they're not being mutilated is horrific. I just want to make one other point too. Elijah brought up the words and the way that words are manipulated. I think this is really important because what we have to understand is on the other side, the sane side of this trans discussion, we are so behind. We're playing catch up right now because the language is so totally controlled by the left, even to the extent of every time we use the word gender, we are actually assenting to the left's framework.
That's correct.
That word itself was introduced into the language the way that it's used now by the people who invented gender ideology for the purpose of mainstreaming it. So,
and by a pedophile
it's
specifically,
actually,
John Money.
It's actually really fascinating too, the whole language thing, because I was in the arts for most of my career, most of my adult life, and I could see this, this starting, and artists started becoming arts activists instead, and it started being like, oh, when you write a play, it should be not just art, not just aesthetic, but there needs to be this activist backbone to it. And you could see people changing the language intentionally, and it started, we had the whole PC thing. Don't say black, say African American. Don't say I don't know, woman, say some other stupid word.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, it's...
But I mean, we saw this happen. It's been happening for a long time. And at first, just like it is now with the whole gender thing, at first it was sold to us with the idea of compassion behind it, right? It's more compassionate to use these terms. It makes other people feel better. It's not offensive if you speak about it this way. And we have consistently allowed ourselves to be bludgeoned with this idea of the compassionate way to talk to people, and we're still there.
I want to just ask, it's a legitimate question that I know will never get answered, because the response on the left will be like, it's a bad faith question. If a kid was, there's general body dysmorphia, dysphoric disorder or something like that. I talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast with Jack Dorsey. If someone, and they feel like their fingers need to be removed, they feel like their hand is
transabled.
This is a thing.
Well,
this is a thing.
Yeah, it's like general body dysmorphic disorder or something like that. Would we then say, for the health and safety of the child, we will remove their perfectly functioning hand? And the other question on top of that is, we've seen young girls get double mastectomies at the age of even 13. Again, I posted this on Twitter. There's a study that was done in 2018 looking at the results of the quality of life. Would we give a 13-year-old boy large breast implants if he said that they would make him feel better and he was depressed? I think overwhelmingly most parents even parents who want to affirm their kids, they'd probably look at that and think twice and be like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right, because breast implants are not typically associated with someone seeking to, like a young boy who's feeling, depressed. And even a young girl wouldn't have double Ds or something like that. But I'm wondering at what point we actually start seeing this.
Yeah. So obviously, at the present moment, the left would at the very least pretend to be horrified by the idea of removing a child's pinky because they've decided that they don't want to have it at an early age. But if you ask any grown man, what would you rather have happened? Would you rather have lost your pinky finger as a child, or would you rather have lost the ability to fully develop reproductively as a child? Any man would tell you he would rather have lost his pinky. It's not even a question.
Well, hold on there. Maybe. But if you don't go through puberty, you don't develop that.
No, that's my point.
Well, so if you ask someone who has been had their gonads removed, that's what this article describes it as, gonad destruction. Before
Sounds like a heavy metal band.
Gonad destruction.
before puberty, they're not going to know what they lost, and they're not going to desire things they haven't developed desire for.
I don't know about that. I think they'll look at healthy married couples and say, "I wish I could have had something like that," because there's an innate drive within the human person.
This has been. You just brought up John Money, and this is so we have a case study in this. And I was like, John Money did that. He's the guy who invented gender ideology, and he did that to a young boy, a baby. Castrated a young boy, and told the parents to raise the boy as a girl. But it didn't. The girl identity didn't take hold because he's not a girl. So eventually they switch back.
Yeah, that was
even with hormones.
And killed himself later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
him and his brother both.
And
killed
the brother,
themselves.
they both did.
And he performed sexual
however,
experiments on them. Well, he was a disgusting pervert on every level.
But this is actually an argument the left counters with, that it proves gender identity is inherent in a person, right? That even though this person who didn't choose to went through this, later in life they said, no, I am male and always was. The left argues that certainly there are people who are born male or female and then later come to realize they have an alternate gender identity.
Well, sex is inherent. A person does have a sex. Gender is a completely nonsensical term that was first developed by the man who performed this sick sexual experiment on children. It was a complete failure, but he reported it as a success. It was printed in medical textbooks as a success. And as a matter of policy in many hospitals, as a result of his lies, many boys who underwent botched circumcision were transitioned as infants.
Yeah, that was messed up.
Yeah, and I've heard that claim from the other side saying, oh, no, that John Money actually proves that we're right. But no, that if gender is determined partially by society and environment and everything, then, and that's what John Money believed, he's the guy who came up with this stuff, then this should have worked, and it didn't. So he actually disproved his own theory in this horrific years-long experiment that he ran on these kids. The thing about gender, you have a definition up there. I mean, originally gender is a linguistic term that refers to words. Like words have gender, masculine or feminine. And John Money's the one who said that, oh no, people have gender too. People have a gender and a sex.
Yeah, so
but you notice something else, because they said that people have a gender and a sex, and they're two different things. And that's what they went with for decades. And now they're kind of collapsing the distinction again. And they've actually gotten away from that. And now they're basically saying that gender and sex are the same thing, because a trans woman is a woman. It's exactly the same thing as a woman. They will not allow anymore that a quote trans woman is a male. They'll say
Right.
a trans woman is a female. So they've gotten rid of the distinction themselves.
And they're enshrining this in law. I mean, now the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects gender identity in the same way that it protects, women.
That was amended nationally.
It's not like they haven't gone back and rewritten the amendment, but the executive orders that Biden signed essentially do that.
Well, in most states have actually passed these civil rights amendments that say gender identity is protected as well. The question then is, how do you define gender identity? And this is where things get more difficult. In New York, for instance, it's defined as a person's self-expression. Because, I pulled up the word gender on Wikipedia, and it says the range of characteristics pertaining to femininity and masculinity and differentiating between them. The challenge is the modern left ideology suggests that a dress is not inherently feminine or masculine, in which case it's not a part of gender. So if you have somebody who has long hair and wears makeup and, wears bras and female clothing, that isn't, according to their own ideology, inherently feminine and gendered, in which case the whole thing starts to become illogical, I suppose.
Well,
how does a child know they're transgender if a little girl says she likes playing with trucks in the color blue? They might say, well, you like things boys like. No, because girls can like trucks in the color blue, same as
Well,
anybody
they're
else.
trying to have it both ways. They're both telling us that gender stereotypes are a problem and need to be abolished, and that you can tell what your gender identity is based on which gender stereotypes you adhere to. And both things can't be true.
I really do think that for the most part, it's not that they're trying to have both. Technically, that's the case. It's that there is no truth but power to these people.
Right.
So any
That's true,
circumstance
too.
in which they can assert something to gain power, they do, and that's why they often contradict themselves. Then we sit here as logical beings trying to understand the map they've created in terms of logic, and it makes no sense to us.
Yeah, in breaking down sexual boundaries is fantastic if you're in a position of power, and rather than having a healthy functioning society, you'd rather have one where people look up to and they're very easy to control. And the best way to break down sex relationships, the best way to break down the family after you've already done things like made contraceptives widely available and socially acceptable, is to go for the actual direct definition of sexuality and completely collapse it so that the sexes have no hope of ever developing any understanding of how they should relate to each other from their society.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.